Today we're gonna make 3 different sports graphic templates, all in the same style. I'm hoping this video can serve as a guide for creating graphic templates from scratch for any team or league or brand. We're gonna key in on some certain elements, keep those consistent throughout all the templates, and then also change things up like the layout. We're gonna be working on templates for the Oakland Spiders today. We're gonna make a game day graphic, a roster graphic, as well as a score update graphic. So 3 different templates. Let's get started on the background first. I found this image of the Oakland Bridge, or the Bay Area Bridge, whatever it is. I think I got this on Unsplash, and Unsplash is a great free resource. If you don't know about it, highly recommend checking it out. Right away, we're gonna drop a gradient map over this bridge. So we're gonna make it a light gray and white design. So I'm gonna open this gradient map, take that black down to more of a light gray, yeah, something around 92%. And then we can also adjust these sliders, bring them in towards each other. We could probably lighten it even more. I wanted like a very subtle nod to Oakland in the background. So something around there feels pretty good to me. Next, we're gonna drag in our player cutout. So for this game day graphic, I'm gonna keep everything centered in the middle of the design. And we'll start by blowing up this cutout of Walker Frankenberg. And now for the treatment on this cutout, maybe we'll shrink him down a little bit. I'm going to, again, use a gradient map over this cutout. Let's make him entirely grayscale. So I just duplicated this gradient map by holding Option and clicking and dragging the layer. And now, again, holding Option, I can clip this gradient map to the layer below it. Now we're gonna open up this gradient map and we'll set this one to more of a dark gray or a black. I guess we can go, yeah, let's go with dark gray. I think something around there feels good. And then with this other slider, I kind of want his, like the super light parts of the image to blend into the background almost. So I'm gonna click this slider and then eyedropper this light gray color. And you can see, like, when I initially did this cutout, the edges aren't perfect. There is like kind of a soft black line around different parts of him. So to get rid of that, I'm going to command click on this thumbnail image of the layer. That'll select him. Then I'll go to select, modify, contract. We'll contract it by 1 pixel, hit OK, and then we're gonna drop a mask. So that just brought in this dotted line 1 pixel on all the edges. I'm just gonna click my mask icon there, and now it feels a lot cleaner. We've gotten rid of some of those black lines. And we can go in further and clean up this cutout if we need to, but for the purposes of this video, we'll move forward and pretend it's as crisp and clean as ever. Now we can also run our cutout through Camera Raw filter, so clicking back to that layer, go to Camera Raw filter from the filter menu, and we can just make some basic adjustments, kind of drop down the highlights, up the shadows, and then typically increase the whites and lower the blacks. We can even up the exposure just because this is kind of like a brighter, light themed image. Then you can open effects and increase the clarity if we want, texture as well. But this feels like a pretty solid base level adjustment. So now you can really see like this shoulder is kind of perfectly blending into the background, which I like personally. There's a little bit of dark detail on his neck here, so maybe we'll just mask that out quickly. So we're gonna run with this high contrast black and white look for all these templates. And one thing I wanna do is give a little bit of pop of color on the cutout itself. So if we turn off this layer, you can see where the yellow parts are. And I'm not gonna show all of the yellow on the jersey and the disc and all that, but I do like this subtle yellow on the sunglasses, the Pit Vipers. So on this mask for the gradient map, I'm gonna hit B for my brush tool, and with a black brush, I'm going to start to hide parts of this gradient map just by painting over the parts in yellow that we want to show. Obviously, yellow is one of the spider's primary colors, so I think it makes sense to have that stand out. And there's a little bit more on the edge. So let's keep adding some more yellow to this design. We're going to type out our game day text, new layer, T for the type tool. The font we're using today is Squatta 1, which is a free Google font. I'm going to make sure it's set to the spider's yellow, and we'll type out game day in all caps. And for this font, the letters are kind of naturally spaced out a little bit, but I want them tighter together. So let's open up our character panel. You can also go up here when you have the type tool selected. And then we'll just lower this icon here by sliding it or hitting the arrow keys just to decrease the space between letters, the kerning as it's called. -40 I like, so I'll hit enter, and then Command T allows us to transform and scale this up. And I'm gonna be toggling my grids a lot with Command apostrophe. This is gonna bring up my grids. I think I have them set to a 1/2 inch. So I'm just gonna make sure my margins are consistent. I'm gonna keep everything 2 box radius from the edge, so we can blow this up a little bit more, and then going to my move tool, Command A to select the whole screen. You can then justify it with these icons at the top. So we're justifying it in the middle vertically as well as horizontally. And the gradient map we put on this cutout does allow the yellow text to stand out and pop out from a white and black background. I'm gonna up the size of the player cutout a little bit more just by selecting player cutout. We can actually group this into a folder and call it cutout. So this is the cutout itself as well as the gradient map. And then Command T, just blow this up a little bit more. Next, we're gonna make the background a little bit more interesting just by adding a couple bars of yellow on the top and bottom. So let's make a new layer. Let's go to our rectangle tool, U is the shortcut, and let's just draw out a rectangle that's the full width of the canvas. And we'll drop this behind our player cutout, but in front or on top of the gradient map that we have in the background. And we can again bring up our grids, Command apostrophe, and then Command T to transform this bar. Let's just make it go about a 1/2 box up from the bottom. And we can also set this blend mode to multiply. So we're getting a little bit of that background showing through. Kind of keeps everything looking smooth. I'm gonna take the same yellow bar, duplicate it, Command J, and then bring it to the top of the design. So Command A to select the whole thing, and then justify with your move tool selected, justify to the top. Now I like this yellow theme we have going from the top all the way down through the middle of the design to the bottom. Next, we're gonna add some text to the corners. So let's make a new layer, T for the type tool, and let's use the same black or dark gray that we used on the player cutout. So I'm just gonna go to my brush tool and hold Option to get the eyedropper, and then sample one of these dark gray colors from the darkest part of the image. Then back to the type tool, hit T, and we'll click in the top left. We're gonna type out an example matchup information. So let's left justify this. We'll type out Oakland Spiders, hit return, versus Los Angeles Aviators. When you're creating these templates, always try to put in the longest possible team name unless you're going to be messing with the font sizes, just to give yourself kind of the maximum room to work with. Let's decrease the space between lines a little bit, and we can change this kerning back to 0. Space those out a little bit more. 7 p.m. Fremont High School. I'm going to shrink this text down a little bit more to something like 28, maybe 26 even. And again, further decrease the space between lines. Now we're going to move this, again, bringing up our grids to that same 2-box margin from both the top and the left. Now for the top right corner, I'm going to drop in the Spiders logo, but we're going to do something a little bit interesting. So I'm just going to scale it down. See how it's got these like circle line connections in the middle of it? I kind of want to steal that as an idea of an element that I can separate out. And so what we're going to do is make it seem like the spider is kind of like coming down from a line or coming down from a web. So let's make a new layer. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool. You could also use the line tool and just increase the stroke. And I'm just going to line this up with the middle of the spider, and we can get more precise. Let's bring up our grids. And this time we're going to line up this top leg with the 2-box margin. That just feels more natural to me, somewhere around there. We can even justify him completely with the bottom of this text. You can hold Command and click on this text in the layers panel. So click on that T, it'll select it all, and then with our Spiders logo still selected, you can justify it to the bottom. So now his legs and the text are perfectly in line. I'm also gonna center this rectangle line on the spider by going to the rectangle, hold Command, click on the Spiders logo, and then justify it to the middle. And now let's hit Command T to bring this up, and we could probably make it a little bit skinnier. Something like that. I'm just gonna re-justify it. And then we'll make a new layer and put a circle on the bottom. So we'll go to our ellipse tool, bring up a circle. While you're holding shift, you can click and drag. And now we can go to our effects and add a stroke to it. Something like a 2-pixel stroke is sufficient. And I'm gonna eyedropper the same black color again, 141414. Hit OK again, and then we'll reduce the fill to 0. So I'm gonna shrink this down a little bit more. Maybe we want a little bit more space and probably a smaller circle still. Now Oakland also has this unofficial third color, green, that they want incorporated. So I'm just gonna put some subtle accent marks around our main game day text. Let's make a new layer on top of everything. First, I'm gonna drag out just a normal horizontal rectangle. And then I'm gonna duplicate this, Command J, and then Command T to transform it. I'm gonna rotate it 90 degrees. If you hold Shift while you're rotating and transform, it'll kind of click to every 15 degrees. So we'll hit return, and then holding Command and clicking on that horizontal rectangle, we can justify this one to the left and to the top. So we get this L-shaped frame. And we're gonna do the same thing to this bottom right corner. So let's duplicate these two rectangles, move it over, and then Command T, rotate it. I'm actually gonna flip these because the Y, that's the part that gets to the widest edge. So let's go top right and bottom left with these. And we can even really space them out evenly by starting this shape, touching the text, and then holding Shift, and then we'll hit the right arrow key once, up arrow key, same thing, repeat it a couple more times. So that was 3 times each. Then we'll do the same thing with this double rectangle. Bring it to the bottom, line it up, and then 1, 2, 3. And we can change all of the colors to green just by selecting all of those and then going to our green swatch. It's still feeling maybe a little bit big to me, kind of a little bit long. Why don't we transform it? I'm gonna click this link up at the top to be exact with each one, and we'll set this to 70% of its current size, and then we'll do the same thing with this. Command T, 70%. That's just shrinking it exactly by the same amount and keeping the position consistent. One more time, I'll hold Shift and go down to the left with those two, and then up and to the right with those two. A couple more little elements we can add. I'm gonna make a new layer, and we're gonna make some plus signs, and we'll just type out a plus sign and then a bunch of spaces, then another plus sign, and hit return and make one more. I kind of want the spacing a little bit uneven, and then maybe we can even mess with the size of one of these plus signs. And this one we can even mess with like this baseline height. So we've got a few plus signs of different sizes. Let's position these first 3 over here on the left side, kind of sort of even with this L shape, and then we'll duplicate our plus signs. We can probably rotate them exactly 180 degrees, and we'll put some more up here. So this just gives us a little green accent in the whole design. And I'm also gonna select all of this game day text plus the little green elements, select it all together, folder, we'll call it game day text. And let's bring up our grids again and Command T to transform all of this. I'm just making sure this stays on the 2-box margin that we set for ourselves. And this feels pretty good. I'm just gonna drop some finishing effects on this template. So we'll make a new folder, call it finishing. Let's make a new layer, select the whole screen with Command A, go to your quick selection, right click, fill, 50% gray, hit OK. Then we'll go up to filter, convert for smart filters, filter, noise, add noise. We'll go to uniform distribution, 6%, and then set this blend mode to hard light and the opacity to 50%. And we can also add a curves layer. Let's go to our adjustments, go to curves, and let's make a couple points on these corners and just bring up the blacks even a little bit more. Give it this kind of matte look to this whole thing. You can see what happens if we increase the highlights. I don't want to do that too much, but maybe a tiny bit. And then we can also add a new gradient map over this whole thing just to give it kind of a yellowy hue. So let's open up our gradient map. And instead of this green, let's eyedropper our yellow. And we can even bring that black back in as the lowest color, the darkest color. I'm gonna adjust this as needed. Something like this, and then we're gonna lower this opacity to something really subtle, like 10%. It's barely noticeable, but it just makes it so it's not like a perfectly black and white image. It gives it a little bit more character and a little bit more team colored. There's our game day graphic. Let's move on to the roster graphic. So I'm gonna package all of this up into a single folder, and we'll call this game day. Now for our roster graphic, we're gonna use a lot of these same elements. We're just gonna restructure the layout a little bit. So let's duplicate this entire folder, Command J, and we'll call this one roster. Now for this one, we're gonna move the cutout to the right side of the image, and then we'll have the roster going down vertically along the left side. And then we're gonna use this concept that we created for this game day text as the title of the graphic in the top left. Let's hide this other text, and I'm gonna shrink down this game day text, just Command T and move it up to the top. We're gonna call this game day roster. We can left justify all this because the graphic in general is going to be left justified. And then we can also create some more contrast in the text just by lowering the font size of the top game day text and keeping roster the focal point. To do that, I'm going to divide this font size by 1.6. 1.6 is approximately the golden ratio. If you're ever arranging hierarchy in your designs, whether it's text or player sizes, 1.6 just seems to be a ratio that is like visually appealing to the eye. So I always tend to do that when I'm messing with my font sizes and I want something either smaller or bigger. And we can shrink this whole thing down a little bit more, something around there. And then let's make sure the top is that same 2-box margin from the top and from the left. Now we can adjust these green accent marks too, and I realize I'll have to readjust the margins, but that's okay. So first we've got this bottom L and the plus signs that go with it. We're just gonna move these. Actually, let's line it all up with the text, the roster, and then we'll hold shift, go down to the left, twice. Looks good to me. And then we'll grab these other green layers and same thing. We'll put it right there, right up. And these plus signs we can, of course, move over. Now for the game day rosters, I often like to have some kind of subtitle, like the week number and the team's opponent, for example. So let's duplicate this game day roster text just for now, Command J, and we'll bring it down and we'll write out week 2 versus Los Angeles. First of all, let's change the color. I guess we can use that same green color, kind of keep it consistent with the plus signs. And then we can lower the size a good bit, bring it like around there. I'm also gonna space it out a little bit, not too much. Yeah, maybe like 60, and I think I want it a little bit smaller, so maybe a size 24. And we'll space it out just so it reaches the end of our text as well. Now we can do our names and numbers going along this left column. Let's close out of the game day text folder. We can rename this to game day roster. And then we have our original black text that we had the game information in the first graphic, and we can turn this into 20 names and numbers that will just go down the left side. So let's type out all the numbers. It doesn't really matter, but these are just placeholders, obviously. I'm gonna right justify the numbers, and then duplicating this layer, let's move it over. And we're gonna do all the names on a separate layer. So this one's gonna be left justified. And to me, this is gonna create a much more readable roster graphic when there's like a clear column of white space between the numbers and the names. So the names, we can just write out first name, last name, and copy and paste it. And now with both the numbers and the names selected, so both those layers, we can move it up to wherever we want it to start. I'm gonna bring up my grids again, and we'll align the the widest number with that 2-box margin. And then we're just going to increase the space between lines, and we'll see the whole thing extending downward. And we'll keep extending it down until we hit that grid mark. That, again, is the 2-box margin from the bottom. And this font only has one weight to it, but if you had a font that had multiple weights, maybe you would do something like bold all the numbers or bold all the names and keep the numbers lighter. But some kind of variation is good in these cases. Maybe for now we'll just space out the first name and last name. And I'm also remembering that our green accent mark here is going outside our margin, and you can see it's like not perfectly lined up. So let's go in and fix that real quick. And we'll take this whole game day roster text and just move it over. So that is our roster graphic. The last thing we're gonna make is a score update graphic. For this one, we're gonna start with the same background and finishing effects. So let's copy over finishing and these background layers. And I'm just holding Option and dragging this on top of everything. Oh, we can grab those yellow lines at the top and bottom as well. We've got this new folder we'll make called score. The first thing I'll do with the score update graphic is make a window for where we're gonna drop a full photo. And to do that, let's make a new layer, get our rectangle tool, and we'll draw out, yeah, maybe starting with that 2, maybe we go 3-box margin for this box, just because we'll have some text and maybe some elements above and below it. And let's be precise and adjust the height to exactly 12 inches, hit return, and then we'll make sure it's justified. We'll probably need a little bit more space in this column. This is where I'm gonna put the score text for each team. So let's transform this down just another box or so. So this is gonna be our photo window. Let's group this into its own folder. Hold Shift, click our folder, and then hold Command to click and mask out just that shape. And now whenever we drop anything into this folder, it's gonna take on the shape of that mask. So we have this full spiders image of Keenan Lawrence. And let's grab that same black and white filter, that gradient map that we used on the player cutout, and let's put it on this photo as well. So I'm going into my other folders, this roster folder, got the cutout gradient map, and I'm just holding Option, clicking and dragging it up. So now it is applying to our photo here. And I'm gonna delete this layer mask because this was cutting out the yellow from the Pit Vipers. Now I'm gonna drop on a mask and we'll just brush out the gradient map of wherever the yellow is on our player here. And we'll still get this pop of color, this pop of yellow. So that's good for the image. Let's close that folder. You can rename it photo. And we'll make a new layer. Let's do our text on the right side. So let's do that same black text color we were using before, which was 141414. And we'll type out, let's start with the number 20, because typically that is the widest and most realistic number we'll see in an Ultimate graphic. And we can bring it a little bit closer together, maybe a -40. Bring up our grids again. For this one, maybe we can afford to go like 1.5 margin, just because we're pretty tight. And I want to keep this number centered exactly between the edge of the photo and the edge of the canvas. Let's duplicate this layer, Command J, and we'll drag this one down, and we'll just write out spiders. We're just gonna do team nicknames for this. And font size, I'm gonna divide it by 1.6, probably a couple times to get it small enough to fit, maybe one more. And I'm gonna center this on the 20 by holding Command, clicking on the T for the thumbnail of the 20, and then justifying it. Now we can bring this spiders on top of the 20, and I'm just gonna line it up exactly with the top, and then hold Shift, hit my up arrow key twice. And now we can duplicate this same score look for the bottom home team score. So duplicate both those layers with Command J, drag it down. Now for this one, we can move the team name below it and write out Aviators. And same thing with lining it up. Hold Shift, down arrow twice, and those are our scores. The other thing we need is an indicator of what quarter it is, or if this is the final score. So let's make a new layer, rectangle tool. I'm gonna use this yellow again. We'll bring back the yellow. And for this one, I'm gonna make a rectangle that's exactly this width of the 20, just by drawing out a rectangle like that. And then we're gonna center this in the whole canvas. So if you hold Command, hit A, center justify it. Inside this yellow box, we can actually just duplicate this Aviators layer move it on top, and then we can type out end of third is typically the widest text that I'll have in this spot. And I'm gonna lower this font size still, again, just by going divided by 1.6, and I'm just justifying it to be perfectly in the middle as well. And then to make sure the 20, the score and the team name is perfectly centered, let's group all of that. No, not end of third. Aviators 20, spiders and 20 into a folder, and then Command A, justify middle, and now you have it equidistant from the text we have in between. A couple other things we can add. We can do that same green accent mark. I'm thinking at the top. Let's go to our roster graphic. We can open up the game day roster text. I can even show it just so we know what we're looking at. And these two rectangles, I'm gonna hold Option and click and drag up to the score graphic. Turn back on the score graphic. Now they've appeared and we can move them to this top corner. And maybe we want another shape down at this corner. So let's grab those plus signs from the other graphic as well. Again, holding Option, clicking and dragging up to our new design, and then we'll move these down to this bottom right corner. A few other things, we can add that spider logo back to one of the corners. So again, going back to the previous graphic, I think I had it, so there it is. Spider logo, rectangle, ellipse. Holding Option, click and drag upward. And I don't mind it here in this corner. Maybe we wanted to shift this one to the left corner, but I'm fine leaving it up there. And then maybe we can add some text to fill this space in the bottom left. New layer, let's go back to our black, dark gray color, 141414, and we'll type out week 2. We'll hit space a bunch of times, and then Oakland Spiders versus Los Angeles Aviators. And we can return this spacing back to normal. It feels too tight when there's a lot of text in a row like that. We can bring back up our handy grid, and let's just keep it that same margin. I'm gonna shrink this down to like 22 maybe, and we can left justify this. So we can now space it out a little bit more, yeah, somewhere around there. And it's worth noting we still have these same finishing effects on each of these designs. And if we wanted to mess with that, we could, like if the yellow was looking too washed out, you wanted it more vibrant, we can always add a hue and saturation layer on top of everything, increase the saturation. So honestly, we can add that over everything just by bringing this out. Outside the folders, you can see the score graphic, roster graphic, and game day. That's gonna do it for this video. We have our 3 templates set. Again, game day, roster, and score. We kept a lot of the same elements, but really just messed with where we were placing things. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Hope to see you in the next one.